the omega of apostasy. We were looking at this timeline here. We finished the first generation, and the last time we looked at Madison, and that was the second generation. Today we're going to still be in the second generation, but a little of what I present will transition into the third generation from 1924 to 1964. Now, after we already dealt with the Alpha of Apostasy with John Harvey Kellogg, he was the person God raised up, especially with the medical missionary work that was to go worldwide. Now, we know that with the Alpha of Apostasy, Kellogg left the faith. Kellogg got into much satanic sophistries and he went astray. So therefore, God chose another man who is not as well known as John Harvey Kellogg, but this man did a wonderful work for God, and he's going to be one of the main people we'll be speaking about today. And his name is John Allen Burden. John Burden. John Allen Burden lived from 1862 to 1942, and he was one of our first sanitarium administrators. When he was 9 years old, John already showed a deep interest in the spirit of prophecy writings. In 1882, he entered Healdsburg College. 9 years later, in 1891, he became manager of the St. Helena Sanitarium. From about 1901 to 1904, he helped develop sanitarium work in Australia. Now remember, Ellen White was also in Australia for a time. Now, Ellen White also, throughout her ministry, she wrote many letters to John Burden. About 83 letters were written to him, and they mostly were all positive, encouraging him in the work that he was doing. John Burden. So as we see from this that we just read here, from Broken Blueprint, page 146, by Vance Farrell, John Burden did work at the St. Helena Sanitarium. Now that is in California. So we're going to see as Battle Creek Sanitarium, everyone was flocking to Battle Creek, where we saw how many institutions were in Battle Creek. Now, after Kellogg went astray, God is going to work through this man, John Burden, to set up the medical missionary work the right way. But now God is looking toward the West Coast, which is California, where Ellen White lived when she came back from Australia. So let's look at Ellen White's return to the U.S. In 1900, soon after her return from Australia, Ellen White made her home, which she called Elmshaven, in Pratt Valley, just below the St. Helena Sanitarium, established in 1878. And remember, that's St. Helena Sanitarium. John Burden was with that place. Urging that medical institutions be established in Southern California, she was guided to select John Burden to undertake the task of locating suitable sites in Southern California. In 1904, he began the search. Ellen White said God had shown her that he would find good properties available at very low prices. And also, when Ellen White returned from Australia, she purchased that home there from John Burden, which was down the hill of the sanitarium there in St. Helena. And she lived in Elmshaven all her life after she returned, and she passed away sadly in 1915. So I'm going to share with you some of the sanitariums which John Burden was working with and how that work was going. So first, let's look at a picture of the St. Helena Sanitarium. This is the St. Helena Sanitarium, which was in California. And in 1891, John Burden was the business manager for the center. He was only 25 years old, and he had implicit confidence in the Lord's leading through Ellen White. He was to play a key role in developing sanitariums and the health work in California and Australia. This man was very intelligent, and God gave him business sense, and he had ways that God had blessed him with to how to have this sanitarium functioning well. And similar like Kellogg, they also had in these sanitariums making food products, healthy food products. So let's look at a little more St. Helena Sanitarium. Here's another picture. The lady on the left is Mamie Hanson Pickett. She was a graduate of St. Helena's first class of nurses in 1895. So that's how the nurses dressed in 1895 at the St. Helena Sanitarium. And the picture on the right, where you see everyone there, is the graduates from the year 1896 at the St. Helena Sanitarium. Look at the nurses dressing all modestly. And it's much different now how nurses dress in hospitals. He was to search out the properties. So while he was surveying the coastal areas and the valleys, he found many tourist hotels and health resort buildings for sale. These had earlier gone bankrupt during a real estate boom and bust. Now, 2 of these were purchased privately on her advice. That's Ellen White's advice. The Paradise Valley Sanitarium in National City and the Glendale Sanitarium in 1905. So let's look first at the 1904 Paradise Valley Sanitarium. This is a picture of the sanitarium right there in California. And this is a picture of Glendale Sanitarium in California. So we see the work there is expanding. We see the time frame there, 1904. We saw the end of the 1800s with the St. Helena Sanitarium. Now we're at 1904. We have Paradise Valley Sanitarium. 1905, we got Glendale Sanitarium. So the work is expanding, but there still was another center to get. In early 1905, Ellen White journeyed south. When she arrived at San Bernardino Valley, she was impressed to instruct Elder Burden to look for a property in that area which could be used for a country sanitarium. Shortly afterward, Burden found Loma Linda. The hotel, ancillary buildings, and 76 acres were for sale for $110,000. Hoping the buyer would make it succeed as a medical facility, so they told Burden he could have it for $40,000. And then it was later discounted to $38,000 and $900. So we see here, God is blessing, and here the price is coming down. Now this area there in Loma Linda, and Ellen White had actually saw it in vision. And when she actually went to see the site there in Loma Linda with her son, Willie White, she told him, I've seen this place before. And her son was saying, Mother, you were never here before. I've seen this place. This is the place, because the very site that she saw in vision is the very site that was obtained there in Loma Linda. So therefore, Ellen White told John to accept it. The option was signed on May 26, 1905 with a down payment of $1,000. And therefore, they got Loma Linda Sanitarium right there in California. So this is the main center that God wants to immensely bless it and get the medical missionary work going right so that it can spread out worldwide. And Ellen White wrote a lot about Loma Linda, this special place. This is Loma Linda Messages, page 125. She wrote, we have recently purchased another sanitarium property known as Loma Linda. I am most grateful to the Lord for making it possible for us to secure this property. It lies 60 miles east of Los Angeles. Remember Los Angeles, we're going to come back to that. On the main line of the Southern Pacific Railway. Its name Loma Linda, beautiful hill, that's what it means, describes the place. Of the 76 acres comprised in the property, about 35 form a beautiful hill, which rises 175 feet above the valley. Upon this hill, the Sanitarium building is situated. So it truly is a beautiful hill. And even this imagery there, set upon a hill for the world to see that God's work going forward from this property at Loma Linda, beautiful hill. The Sanitarium building was located there. And notice it has 76 acres because God always wanted, he told to tell Ellen White, which told his people that whenever you're getting these sanitarium properties, make sure there is much acres because there's to have a school with the sanitarium and also the gardening work as well. So once again, Loma Linda messages. God has not been pleased with the way in which the work has been neglected from many places in Southern California. The light is to shine forth to the multitudes. Present truth is to be as a city set on a hill which cannot be hid. Loma Linda is a beautiful hill set up on that hill there. And she says present truth is to be as a city set on a hill which cannot be hid, because those who leave and get educated from Loma Linda were to go forth preaching the present truth, the right arm of the gospel, preaching with it the three angels' messages, because Jesus is soon to return. Southern California is a world renowned as a health resort. Every year, many thousands of tourists go there. They must hear the last warning message. We are called upon by God to explain the scriptures to these people. We are not to build hotels for the accommodation of tourists. We are not to establish sanitariums in the cities. We are not to establish sanitariums in the cities. All right. We are to establish our work where we shall be able to do the most good to those who come to our sanitariums for treatment. So the people will come to us in the country settings. The Lord would have brave, earnest men and women take up his work in these places. The cause of God is to make more rapid advancement in Southern California than it has in the past. Every year, thousands of people visit Southern California in search of health, and by various methods, we should seek to reach them with the truth. They must hear the warning to prepare for the great day of the Lord, which is right upon us. So we see why God wanted, from what was taking place where everyone flocked into Battle Creek, now focusing West Coast with California, because as it says here, every year thousands of people are visiting Southern California, and these people needed to be reached with the gospel and of course the health message combined. So therefore the present truth message must go forward from California. So God's people have a work to do in this area. I desire that all the work of this place shall be a correct representation of what our health institutions should be. Loma Linda Messages, page 564. So Loma Linda is to be the blueprint now where others are to follow, and it should show what our health institutions should be like, a correct representations of what our health institutions should be like. So what were they teaching in the school there at the sanitarium in Loma Linda? It was called the College for Medical Evangelists, and the course will embody such subjects as hydrotherapy, practical and theoretical, massage, practical and theoretical, hygiene, physiology, anatomy, dietetics, healthful cookery, healthful dress, the study of diseases and diagnosis, and medical evangelistic methods of field work. Now, some of these even same courses were the same teachings that they were getting over there in Tennessee with Madison. These are the type of courses to be given in Loma Linda. Loma Linda is to be not only a sanitarium, but an educational center. With the possession of this place comes the weighty responsibility of making the work of the institution educational in character. A school is to be established here for the training of gospel, medical, missionary, evangelists. Much is involved in this work, and it is very essential that a right beginning be made. Now we saw, she stated in Loma Linda Messages 564 that Loma Linda should be a correct representation of what our health institutions should be like. And she states here, it's not only to have a sanitarium, must have an educational center, and the purpose of this educational center is to send forth gospel, medical, missionary, evangelists. You see, the combining of the medical missionary work with the gospel work, so that those who go forward are fully equipped as a medical missionary and have the knowledge of the scriptures to proclaim Revelation 14 verses 6 through 12, the last message for a dying world. And this blueprint here is what all of our institutions should be doing, training gospel, medical, missionary, evangelists. But a change has taken place. So we'll get into that. Continuing, be very careful not to do anything that would restrict the work at Loma Linda. Be very careful. She's warning not to do anything that would restrict the work at Loma Linda. It is in the order of God that this property has been secured, and he has given instruction that a school should be connected with the sanitarium. We see it again, school, sanitarium. A special work is to be done there in qualifying young men and young women to be efficient medical missionary workers. They are to be taught how to treat the sick without the use of drugs. Now remember, this is the blueprint model for all our institutions. So all of our institutions, the medical missionary, sanitariums with educational work, and even our educational centers that are teaching the medical missionary work, they are to be taught how to treat the sick without the use of drugs. What do we have now? Drugs everywhere. Where's the sanitariums? Gone. What is there now? Hospitals using drugs. But they were initially, Loma Linda set up, they are to be taught how to treat the sick without the use of drugs. Such an education requires an experience in practical work, practical medical missionary work. So you are helping people to get better using the natural remedies. There's only one method of healing which heaven approves: natural remedies, treating the people who are sick without the use of drugs. Now, why are drugs so bad? Well, she tells us. Medical Ministry 223. Drugs always, what's that word? Always have a tendency to break down and destroy vital forces. Now, vital force is what a person has when they're living, the energy that they have. When a person is soon to pass away, their vital force is getting very low. Vital force is 0, you're dead. So she's saying that drugs have a tendency to break down vital forces. It can speed up your death. And nature becomes so crippled in her efforts that the invalid dies. Not because he needed to die, but because nature was outraged by the drugs that were put into the system. It's a tremendous load, especially those who are in hospital settings getting much drugs at the same time. Many times they're giving you this little tiny bit cup to drink water, not enough water, And all of that drugs is going to hit the kidneys hard. It's going to hit the liver real hard. And your body's taking all of this. It is a great, your nature, it says here, was outraged by all of that attack on the body. Then she says also, Selected Messages, Book 2, this is also found in many other statements in the Spirit of Prophecy. Drugs never cure disease. Never. They only change the form and location. Nature alone is the efficient restorer. So when he's speaking about nature, this is God's work. God created this wonderful body, this beautiful machinery, and it is God who keeps us. It is God who has our bodies functioning correctly. So when it mentions nature alone is the effectual restorers, it's the laws that God has set up in our being, that God is the one who is healing us whenever we are sick. Nature alone is the effectual restorer. And how much better could she perform her task if left to herself? So it's stating here that without putting that tremendous load on the body with all these drugs which do not cure disease and which have all these side effects, if you leave nature alone and give your body what it needs to restore itself with prayer, that it can do the task and healing can be restored to the person who is sick. Another reason why all of our centers were to teach people without the use of drugs is I was shown that more deaths have been caused by drug taking than from all other causes combined. All other causes. Think of how many methods in this world that people are dying from, so many other different things. But Ellen White was shown that more deaths have been caused by drug taking than from all other causes combined together. If there was in the land one physician in the place of thousands, a vast amount of premature mortality would be prevented. Multitudes of physicians and multitudes of drugs have cursed the inhabitants of the earth and have carried thousands and tens of thousands to untimely graves. And we see it now, the linkage between the medical doctor and big pharma. The medical doctor primarily is many times just dispensing drugs for big pharmas. So that's why she mentions multitude of physicians, multitudes of drugs, because they work hand in hand as we see it in this world. And what does she say? It has cursed the inhabitants of the earth. So therefore, God gave us a method of dealing with sickness that does not curse the earth, that will not use drugs, which causes more deaths than all other causes combined, and help people to be restored physically, mentally, spiritually, and physically. So this is God's way, and this is what God planned, and this is what he's starting here in Loma Linda and at those other centers as well. This is how our medical missionary sanitariums were to operate without the use of drugs at all. Another thing she states about, because she said the sanitariums needed to have an educational center there, a school there. She writes, our schools should have little to say now of degrees and of long courses of study. The work of preparation for the service of God is to be done speedily. Why? People are dying every day and going to Christless graves. So those who go to these centers, Loma Linda, they are to be trained, not going like now courses are, you go through your bachelorate and then you got to go to a next level, another 4 years, and then you got to go residency, more years. We cannot wait that long. People are dying. So God's method was, you go to these places, you get trained, as it says there, for the service of God is to be done speedily, quickly. You don't have these long 10 years of school after school after school after school, all that brain. Let the work be carried forth in strictly Bible lines. Let every soul remember that the judgments of God are in the land. Let degrees be little spoken of. Because All of these degrees can go to people's heads and they get full up with pride because I got these letters after my name and I think I'm the big stuff now. But if you really know, where did degrees come in the educational system? In the Encyclopedia of Education, Volume 3, page 26, it has said in there, most of the earthly universities of Europe were founded by the Pope, and degrees were confirmed by his representatives and by virtue of his authority. The custom of awarding degrees spread from Italy to other European states, and from Spain to France, France to England, to the colonies of America. Today, degrees are conferred by institutions of learning in all parts of the world. The title doctor, doctor this, doctor that, was sometimes confirmed as an honor by the Pope or Emperor after the public exercises had been completed. The Chancellor congratulated the candidates and by the authority of the Pope awarded the license to teach. Then the candidate was invested with the marks of his office. The next sat upon a magisterial chair and a special cap was placed on his head and he was given a gold ring. So all of these degrees, this is not of God. This here is coming from Catholicism, and it just, as always, spreads through the world. Our method is to be teaching, and we are same thing we looked at in 1901. All of you are brethren. We are all medical missionaries. We are all supposed to do the same work and to go forward to save the lost. And once we get the training, we're to go. But all of these degrees, this is the worldly way. Our way was to be different. McGann and Sutherland knew that. The light has been given me that tremendous pressures will be brought upon every Seventh-day Adventist with whom the world can get into close connection. Those who seek the education that the world esteems so highly are gradually led further and further from the principles of truth until they become educated worldlings. All these letters behind some individuals' names lacking common sense and lacking knowledge of the Word of God, and they become educated worldlings. So that's the education that the world esteems so highly. But yet, at what a price have they gained their education? They have parted with the Holy Spirit of God. So this is solemn. That's Fundamentals of Christian Education, page 535. Those who seek the education that the world esteems so highly can end up becoming educated worldlings. So this is the warnings now of how the educational system must be different from the world. She gives more information. Same page. There is constant danger among our people that those who engage in labor in our schools and sanitariums, notice he links schools and sanitariums because they were to work together, will entertain the idea that they must get in line with the world, study the things that the world studies, and become familiar with the things that the world becomes familiar with. This is one of the greatest mistakes that could be made. We shall make grave mistakes unless we give attention to the searching of the Word. So as we see, the Word of God is to be prominent in the education of anyone who goes to God's Seventh-day Adventist educational centers. And she's warning there that there will be individuals who will entertain this idea coming in their mind from the enemy of soul, Satan, that they need to get in line with the world, study what the world does, and link up with the world. And then she says this is one of the greatest mistakes that can be made. So she wrote a lot about this, especially during the time period here in the early 1900s, when we're having our schools set up, we have this counsel from the servant of the Lord. Schools, sanitariums do not follow the world and in their methods of teaching and the world studies. Continuing on, and there are some who have secured this worldly education, think that they can introduce it into our schools. But let me tell you that you must not take what the world calls the higher education and bring it into our schools and sanitariums and churches. We need to understand these things. I speak to you definitely. This must not be done. So you see, this is the servant of the Lord. This must not be done. She's warning God's people, do not do this. And because there was a time even at Loma Linda that as they were saying that, well, we could go to school here, and then after they go here for a few years, they can go to one of the worldly schools to finish their medical education. And she's warning, do not do it. I speak to you definitely. This must not be done. Our education, let it stay here and follow the blueprint, the Bible and natural remedies, and we need not go to the world. But as we've been going through this series dealing with the Omega of Apostasy, we see that there is one individual who is constantly fighting against what the servant of the Lord is saying, and he's in high leadership positions. And here he is once again, Mr. A.G. Daniels, conference president. And here's what he says: in contemplating a college that will grant medical degrees and diplomas to be presented to state boards and be used by our medical missionaries in their endeavor to qualify for the foreign lands to practice there, I contemplate the establishment of a full-fledged medical college that will be recognized, that will give students a preparation for graduation, that will be recognized by legal bodies such as the American Medical Association. That's the AMA. And they're the ones that these medical institutions were under the AMA. This is the worldly method, the AMA. He says, you know, it must have such recognition to be worth a nickel. So he's basically saying, even though God has given us the blueprint at Loma Linda, forget that. We need to get full-fledged medical college that is recognized by the AMA. And then when we're recognized by them and compromise and join with the world, if we don't do that, our centers wouldn't even be worth a nickel. This is the President A.G. Daniels, what he's stating. So you know Ellen White is not going to be silent. 1910, she writes a letter to John Burden, because John Burden now is leading out over Loma Linda. During the night of April 26, many things were opened before me. I was shown that now, in a special sense, we as a people are to be guided by divine instruction. The servant of the Lord. The Bible. Those fitting themselves for medical missionary work should fear to place themselves under direction of worldly doctors, to imbibe their sentiments and peculiar prejudices, and to learn to express their ideas and views. They are not to depend for their influence upon worldly teachers. They should be looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. So here is the counsel. Medical missionary work should fear to place themselves under direction of worldly doctors. And this is exactly, sadly, what happened with Sutherland and McGann. Both of them, they had listened to what Kellogg said, and they went out into Nashville to get training there to become an MD. And while they're there, writing how bad, and they're understanding why Ellen White counseled against these places, because they were swearing, cursing, smoking, and the environment was not of God. And after being there, it is there that McGann starts coming up with this idea about we need accreditation. And then McGann later will go to Loma Linda. We'll touch on him in the future. And Sutherland also starts accreditation. We'll get to that as well. After they go to get a medical degree, which was something Kellogg was saying it will be good to do. John Burden now. From 1910 onward, Elder Burden, Ellen White's most faithful friend at Loma Linda, was steadily pushed into the background, and men trained in worldly universities gradually took over. Within 4 years, they had driven the College of Medical Evangelists into heavy debt. And as you go through the history, you see this time and time again. A.G. Daniels wants something done. This individual is standing in his way. He gets them removed. And another person wasn't following, was shipped off to Greece. And you see that this is a method taking place, because John Burden, following the servant of the Lord, was not in agreement with what A.G. Daniels is wanting, which is contrary to the servant of the Lord. In May 1910, Elder Burden had been asked to turn the chairmanship of the board over to Elder George A. Irwin, president of the Pacific Union Conference, but retained his position as business manager until April of 1912. So in a sense, you could say he's being demoted now. Now he's just manager, when the board gave it to W.D. Salisbury. All the faithful work that John Burden has been doing for all these years in Loma Linda, he's being pushed aside because A.G. Daniels wants accreditation, and others in leadership as well. Rubble explained that when he was sent in 1910, so Rubble is sent now to come on over from the General Conference to be the president of the College of Medical Evangelists at Loma Linda. He had instructions from headquarters, that's General Conference, to get that man Burden out of the institution. That's the orders he's been given. For several months after its purchase, he and Elder Owen, this is Burden and Owen, held in trust the title deed to the Loma Linda property, hoping it could soon be turned over to the conference. Now, this is one thing with Elder Burden, John Burden, didn't really realize with the conference leaders, that he wanted just to work with the church and to work with them, rightly so, but you see the direction with A.G. Daniels, that he's going contrary. So he had Loma Linda set up, but it was set up there under the conference. And then what happens here is, when he suggested to Ellen White his desire to deed the property over to the conference, she three times objected. Not yet, not yet, not yet. Don't give over to the conference leaders with A.G. Daniels and W.W. Prescott at the head. Don't give over to them the deed to the Loma Linda property, the title deed, because we see that he's in rebellion. Not yet, not yet, not yet. But sadly, years later, Burden confessed to me, that is to Owen, that was one of the worst mistakes I ever made. I should have heeded Sister White's cautions and not surrendered the property without permission. So after time, years later, he had actually given to the conference the deed, but when he did that, he didn't consult Ellen White first. And on July 16, 1915, at the age of 87, Ellen White passed to her rest. Within 2 months, Elder Burden, that's after Ellen White died, was transferred to Paradise Valley Sanitarium shortly before her death, she had spoken to him. And this is what she told this conversation with John Burden. In talking with Elder John Burden shortly before his death, he told me that during his last visit with Sister White, she made the statement that God was going to lay her to rest in order to save her the heart-breaking experience of seeing her message to the church rejected. So Ellen White passes in 1915, and after she passes, this quest by A.G. Daniels and W.W. Prescott and these leaders there rushing on to accreditation goes speed forward ahead. And Ellen White is laying to rest to not see that heartbreaking scenes take place where everything that God has said is being rejected. So A.G. Daniels was opposing the work to be done in Loma Linda. Continue from the broken blueprint, but it was A.G. Daniels who was in charge, not John Burden, nor W.A. Rubble. And Daniels, who had been trying to eliminate Madison, we spoke about that last time, in 1904, in 1909, would reject Ellen White's call to stop meat eating. So he rejected the health message. He told P.T. McGann in 1911 that it was ridiculous to move out the cities and was in no mood to be different from the world when it came to our denominational medical work. So let's look. Conference president here, A.G. Daniels. He's rejecting the health message. He's rejecting the call to move out the cities. And he wants the medical work to be no different from the world. To inquirers who asked why he, the General Conference president, ate meat all his life, Daniels replied that he felt it was good for him. Rebellion. Now, we're told in Counsels on Diets and Foods in page 404, Ellen White writes, erroneous eating and drinking result in erroneous thinking and acting. By him rejecting the health message, his mind is clouded, and all of these decisions that he is making is decisions that are not led by God and that are pleasing to the devil. What actually took place to Loma Linda? Ellen White dies 1915. And as I spoke about Percy McGann before, Percy McGann leaves Sutherland when Ellen White says that this work that you're doing here needs to go forward. He leaves him, goes to Loma Linda, and it is Percy McGann who was the main person who helped to get the accreditation of Loma Linda to take place. Now, the AMA, a person from the AMA went over and saw Loma Linda and had an interview with John Burden, and he was explaining what the work he's doing here, and the man was greatly impressed and says, you don't even need to be accredited by the work you're doing here, and it's a good work. But A.G. Daniels didn't like that. Now, Percy McGann now goes to try to get this accreditation to take place. And accreditation is like making a deal with the devil. He was deceived and thinking that this is a good thing. But once you start the process, after a while, Percy McGann saw and said, what have I done? What happened was the people who were graduating from Loma Linda, when they left there, they weren't going into missions. They would just go to work in a medical center. And the work was being declined as it was first started, is to send out medical, missionary, gospel evangelists to spread the message to the world. The people are graduating, but they're just going into the worldly medical field and not going into missions. So McGann later on regretted the work that he was doing to get it accredited. Now, they said they had to get a C rating, then they needed to get an A rating, and then they had to get many, many buildings because the AMA's demands were never ending. Then they told them, well, you need to build a hospital in Los Angeles. As I remember, we spoke about Los Angeles before. She said we ought to build no centers, no sanitariums in Los Angeles. Here comes the AMA now. You need to build not a sanitarium, a hospital in Los Angeles. So you see, they're accumulating all of this debt because they're saying you need this, you need this, you need this, you need this. And then they got to build this. McGann is going from place to place trying to get money from Adventists to say, we need to get this work done at Loma Linda. We need help. We need money, because AMA is saying you need all these things to be accredited. They finally go along and they get that hospital built in Los Angeles in rebellion against the spirit of prophecy. Now, on Sunday afternoon, this was April 21, 1918, there was a crowd of 2,000 people there. They were assembled for the dedicatory service for this new hospital in an open air meeting, and they had people from the AMA there. And they had the nerve, when they built this center, to call it the White Memorial Hospital. You see why God laid her to rest? Imagine Ellen White's heart if she were to see that they actually build a hospital in the city and call it White after Ellen White, when Ellen White told them no centers are to be in the cities. They need to be in the countries, and they're not to be hospitals, they're to be sanitariums. But she passed away, and basically, in honor for her, we're going to call it the White Memorial Hospital. So what does God do? The rebellion of them to actually use Ellen White's name on the title, have a hospital in Los Angeles, God said, don't do that. God, to show his displeasure by what they're doing, God gave the largest earthquake in 18 years to that area right there in California. And it suddenly shook the whole city area and damaged even some of the buildings in Loma Linda. So they're doing the dedicatory service, and God sends a massive earthquake. It was a 6.8 earthquake and shook up the whole people, terrified them, to show that God is not pleased by what you are doing. So you would think after the earthquake they would stop. No, they don't stop. They keep on with this accreditation process. And it's many years with the accreditation going on to meet all the demands and to be fully accredited, even after God sends that massive earthquake, and even some of our own centers at Loma Linda were greatly damaged by the earthquake. They don't change. So that's the story of what took place. So therefore, it was Loma Linda Sanitarium. What do we have now? Loma Linda University. You see, university is not now. So it's not the College of Medical Evangelists anymore. Everything is changed up. It's university, and they're at the hospitals now, where the sanitariums is hospitals. And what are the hospitals doing? Drug medication. So that's the downfall. And they just put all this money into it. And here, many Adventists glory and look what we have going on in Loma Linda, as if Loma Linda is following God's blueprint. God is not pleased with the work that's going over there. He didn't tell you to do that. But some people, because they don't know the history of how our centers are supposed to be run, they think that these hospitals and all of these centers, we're doing great. We're doing great. No. Rebellion, omega of apostasy. So now let's get back, because our last study we looked at Madison. What happened to Madison? Well, Madison now, Sutherland was there, and Sutherland decided to have the nursing program at Madison accredited. So after he did that, this is 1933. So we're transitioning into the third generation now. And it was accepted as a 4-year Tennessee College Association. But then when he did that, as I say, the AMA, we want more. They said, you need more buildings on campus. You need a library with 10,000 volumes of books. And by having to get all of these different buildings on the campus there at Madison, they assumed massive debt that they couldn't even deal with. So what happened was the action was taken in 1963 now to transfer the operation of the college and hospital now, transition the hospital to the Adventist church. So it was a sanitarium, then it gets transferred into a hospital with the accreditation process. And then because of all the debt now, they transferred it over to the Adventist church. Remember Ellen White said she was sitting on the board. She said this place is to be separate from the conference. And she said how it's to be incorporated. They go against the council, go accreditation, get debt, and now they're giving it to the conference. So what will the conference do with that great Madison school? The executive committee of the Southern Union accepted the recommendation of Madison College and the Sanitarium. Therefore, the ownership of the college and the hospital was transferred to the SDA denomination in April 1863. And the next year, in 1864, they closed down Madison College. Once they get it, they shut it down. In February 6, 1964, the board voted to close down the nursing school, but the college as well, yet only the nursing program had lost its accreditation. Because the nursing program lost accreditation, but the conference, this work done down there is of no interest to them, and they shut down the entire college as well, which was separate. Madison College was officially closed as of September 1st, 1964, 1 year after having been given to the Union and 60 years after the school opened in 1904. So now you can see why Ellen White says, this true blueprint of true education, Sutherland and McGann, starting there at Madison School, which had all of these acres and they were making foods and the Lord was tremendously blessing this place. Do not give it to the conference. Don't do it. They go contrary to council, go accreditation, give it to the conference. Conference shuts everything down. They are not interested in that work. So this is how the Omega of Apostasy, and we're talking about our educational systems and our medical system. Both are in bed with the world, contrary to counsel, and this is why we are in the state that we are in, so that people who are following the Bible, where do I send my children? Because the schools is given the worldly education. Where can they get trained to do medical missionary work where it's just hospitals, which are rejecting the blueprint? So as we see in the Omega of Apostasy, why are we in this condition? Accreditation. Joining with the world is why our educational system and the medical system is totally done opposite to the way God has said. And so you sow to the wind, you reap the whirlwind. And here now we are reaping. So as we see what has taken place in this world, they are in bed with the world. And therefore, even over there in La Sierra, preaching evolution. Because when you're in accreditation and you have all of these things from the world, you act like the world and you teach what the worlds teach. But yet you still say you're an Adventist institution. So this is where we are in the Omega of Apostasy. And that's the reason what. That's what happened to Loma Linda. And that's what happened to Madison. A.G. Daniels' leadership are the cause why the rebellion is taking place, and they're pushing. We want the educational system accredited, and we want the medical system accredited, and everything now is accredited. So brothers and sisters, in these last days, get ready, get ready, get ready. We're in the Omega, but our soul salvation is between us and the Lord. Every knee shall bow, we're judged individually. The church is in the state that it is because of rebellion to the council, but we individually can follow the Bible and the spirit of prophecy and be wise and do what God says and be saved in his kingdom. Let us pray. Father in heaven, what a somber thought as we see that you had everything planned so perfectly for us to be the head, but through rebellion and not listening to the counsel, we truly are the tail. We ask that you would help your people to give us wisdom to know what is the truth, so that we can follow it and not follow wrong methods taking place in the omega of apostasy. Help us to have a love for your word and the spirit of prophecy, and help us to educate ourselves in the right pathways. In Jesus' name, amen.